All right, welcome to the 2026 season of the Relentless 21 podcast for Oregon and college football. So each week we're going to go over some quick analysis for the Oregon Ducks as well as a national landscape for college football. So to start this week, we'll go over three questions that I have for Oregon going into this season. So the first one is really all about the offense and defensive coordinator spots, right? So last year, at the end of the season, they ended up moving on from both Will Stein, who moved over to Kentucky, and Tosh Lavoie, who moved over to Cal, both becoming head coaches. Definitely an exciting moment for both of those guys who put in a lot of work to get there. Unfortunately, in the playoffs of last year, the fact that we knew both were leaving during that time period brought a lot of controversy. And this is not the first time that this has happened in this brand new era of college football. The scheduling of when in the calendar year teams are trying to hire new coaches, where sometimes those coaches are still in the middle of their season and you pair that with issues with recruitment calendars and transfer portal issues, and it's a hot mess right now in college football, right? So during the playoff run last year, you know, Todd Boys defense had a great game, one game, and then Will Stein's offense had a great game the other game. And then when they ended up beating Indiana, they kind of hit a buzzsaw, right? And so it's a very big challenge for coordinators or even head coaches to be asked to try to navigate coaching the team that they spent all year investing in and trying to help their new team. Because there's a lot of pressure that if you don't move over into helping your new team quick enough, you're going to be behind the eight ball when it comes to recruitment. So last year, both Tasha and Will Stein were given the autonomy to work both on their current season and try to prepare for their next season with their new teams. That's a very big challenge. I think they did the best that they could, but I do think it played a factor in preparation for especially that Indiana game. I think at that point, Indiana was rolling. It was very surprising to me as an Oregon fan at how uncompetitive Oregon was. There was a lot of injury at that running back spot, which definitely did not help. But what I was really surprised about was how quickly the wheels fell off in that game. I was expecting it to be a repeat of the first matchup where it was a back and forth game into the fourth quarter. Oregon actually was winning late, and then an untimely turnover really sealed that for Indy in that first game. So I was expecting that kind of matchup, and unfortunately, that did not happen. So both Will Stein and Tosh Lavoie move off to their new roles, and there was a lot of question of, hey, are they going to find somebody externally for these roles? But I think Dan Lanning decided we are going to reward the guys we currently have in our system. Dan has a really good track record of finding guys that he can develop into head coaches, and he's building his own mini coaching tree, even though he's only been a head coach for a couple of years here. So I do trust Dan's judgment and who he thinks could handle these roles. So for the offensive side, we have Drew Maringer. So he was a quarterback at Rice. And then he has made his way up the rankings when it comes to coaching. He was at James Madison for a little bit as an offensive coordinator. Um, and he moved to the University of Houston to work with their receivers, to Rutgers to be their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. Then he moved over to Texas to work with their receivers, Florida Atlantic to work with their receivers, New Mexico. He was the co offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And then with Oregon, he has been the tight ends coach until he was recently promoted. So you can see he has a consistent string of positions where he is definitely an offensive guy. He has experience being an offensive coordinator, doing the play calls. I would say his work with the tight ends was extremely evident the last half of that season last year when they had a lot of injuries at the receiver spot. The tight end position was definitely utilized extremely well the back end of that season. So, my impression so far, is that he seems like he is a creative guy, a little bit different than Will Stein, but that might not be bad. That might actually be good, to get some new blood into that role, see what he wants to do in certain situations. I feel like Will Stein was always extremely creative. He always had really tight game plans going in, but I think where Will Stein could get better is at adjusting in the game. There were a couple instances where I feel like that is an area he can improve in. And so maybe True can come in and be that guy that's a little stronger in that area. I would take that if we have to give up a little more creativity. Um, and give a little bit more up on that area and then increase our ability to adjust in game, I would take that. And so I'm excited to see what he does. There's so many weapons on this team that really one of the challenges is how do you get the ball to all these different people, right? So I'm interested to see how he does that. Then on the other side of the ball, we have Chris Hampton. So he's been with Oregon for a couple of years. He's been the co-defensive coordinator already and safeties coach under Dan. He had previously was with Tulane as their defensive coordinator. And there's nothing but good things have been said about him so far. And I think one of the things that Tosh really struggled with, um, where Will Stein had seemed to have like a really strong plan A. Tosh was a little more shaky with plan A, um, strategy wise, meaning sometimes I think he came into a game with like the perfect game plan. The Texas Tech game plan was really good. And then sometimes I really questioned his strategy. Against USC last year, I did not understand why we were stuck in man most of the game. And they were just, even though, Oregon ended up winning that game, those USC receivers were absolutely killing us on those back shoulder fades on the sidelines, whether they were getting PI calls or completions for, 30-yard chunks. That would have been something as a defensive coordinator I would have wanted to see somebody adjust to. I would have wanted to see somebody say to USC, we know this is who you are. We're going to make you work your way through the entire length of the field and force you underneath. I wanted to see that a little bit more from Tosh. So sometimes his A plan was not the best. Sometimes it was. And then sometimes in game could have been better. So I think Chris is going to be really a really key piece to saying, can we get better in that area? Right. So those are the top three questions I have for Oregon, right? If it oh I forgot it. I was doing so good. Okay. Oh, I think I just okay. So that's the top question I have for Oregon going into 2026. The second question I have is about the defensive rush. Okay. So Oregon returns all four of their starting defensive linemen. And for that reason, they are very highly rated going into this season. All four of those guys could have been in the NFL last year. and you return all four of them. They work well together. I think that all four will probably end up in the NFL next year. There's no doubt about the talent. What was underwhelming with that group was that they ranked 44th nationally in sacks with just 30. They did a lot better with quarterback pressures. You know, they were getting pressure, that wasn't a problem. But getting home was kind of frustrating when you consider the fact that the secondary was so strong. And so I'm hoping that this year they come into it with a little bit more emphasis on getting home, right? If you add that into your toolbox as a defense, then you take a really, really good defense and turn it into an elite, Georgia defense of a couple of years ago, where teams are just fucking scared to play you, right? That's a missing piece of this defense is getting home on the quarterback. Part of that is the offensive coordinators and the other teams know, the talent up front and try to get the ball out quickly, and that's going to happen. But in, third and long situations where the team's going to drop back, you got to get home. You got to get home more often. And I think Amari Washington is really, really fucking good. He'll probably be a first round pick probably. Barrett Alexander really improved from his time with USC, and I think he'll be, probably a day two guy. And then, on the edges, we have two guys that probably should also be, at least in the first couple of rounds. I think we need more out of Mateo. He 2 years ago had several sacks, was getting home, and then this last season, for some reason, he was getting, in the face, but wasn't as uh, explosive in getting the quarterback to the ground as he was the previous year. I think part of that was I think they gave him more focus on stopping the run, and he did better at that than the previous year. So hopefully this year he takes it and puts it back together, right? So he definitely improved in run stopping. Now let's pair that with his natural ability to rush the quarterback, and I think you're going to see um, a lot more sacks. I also think they need to integrate people like Nasir um, a little bit more. He was that guy that they brought in occasionally third down, and he was explosive and did get home. So maybe in third down situations, you find a way to get him in more. Maybe you rotate somebody inside, maybe move Mateo inside a player or two, because he is athletic enough to do that. And I did see them do that sometimes, but I think they need to do it a little more consistently because Nasir, he's too good not to be on the field. I think he's gonna have a breakout season this year, right? So there's stuff that they can do to get better at that. And from what I've heard, it has been an emphasis for this defense. So the third question I really think is a factor for this year is Dante Moore, right? So he grew a lot from his time at UCLA, um, where his decision making got better, his confidence got better, his management of the offense got better. But you definitely saw a drop in production and execution when he played better teams. So he seemed to do extremely well, against the little guys, which is a growth because he was struggling with that with the little guy at UCLA previously. So he is growing. And then I think his best big pressure game was probably against Penn State. He had a slow start, but in that second half, or I guess it probably was like the third quarter in overtime. He did extremely well in pressure situations. But then at the back end of that first Indy game, um, turnovers were a problem. And then even though the defense played lights out against Texas Tech, turnovers were a problem. Even there were even some a little bit of not great moments. The back end uh, of James Madison that first round. So I think that when you pair that with that first half against Indy the second time around, that's probably what sealed him coming back, right? Because he's shown that he really wants to be the best quarterback he can in preparation for the NFL. He is a smart enough kid to recognize that it has not been very fruitful for quarterbacks just to come out when they're not ready, be placed on a not very good team, and be out of the league in a couple of years or running around as a backup. Um, it's not it's not healthy for a quarterback's development or their confidence, right? So it's better to take a little bit more time in college to season a little bit, and then you will be better prepared for the NFL. So I think that first half in the playoff game against Indy kind of sealed him coming back. And so even though it was really painful to watch, this might be a blessing in disguise if he's able to convert that experience into better production this year. So really what you're talking about is decision making and turnovers, right? So the turnovers in the Indy game, that pick six was just, you know, a little bit of nerves and a poor read and a poor decision, right? And so you gotta read the field a little better on that. And then some of the stuff like the turnovers with handling the ball from center, that's on him. That a little bit of it was, not having a lot of running backs available, but most of that was really Dante, right? So he has to take care of the ball. And if he does that, he has an arm that, most people would be jealous of. And the other thing I want to see him improve on quarterback runs. This would drive me crazy during the season where he is an athletic guy and he can be quick, but something happens when he decides to run the ball that he suddenly is not very athletic. Um, and I think part of the problem is he's a little late in deciding when he wants to run. So I noticed a couple of the times it was like third and fourth and like five or six or something. And he drops back and nothing's there and he's trying to scramble. He pulls back and he waits, and then he runs. So by the time he decides to run, the defense is able to recover. But on top of that, like he's not aggressive with it. So if you were going to be like, oh shit, I need to take this myself, you have to be aggressive and get over that line of scrimmage or get over the first down marker. And there were so many times, several times throughout the season, where he was running, trying to pick up the first down, and he was always like a half yard short, a yard short. And it resulted in the death of a drive. And it's not going to, I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen. That it's not possible that that can happen naturally. You're going out loud and the defense is just stops you. That happens. But these weren't those situations. This was really on him being a little too indecisive. So if he's going to run, which is not a big part of his game, I want him to put his foot in the ground and get upfield and find space and just fucking fall forward. It doesn't have to be pretty. But I want him to be a little bit more decisive with deciding when to run and decisive when to finish the run. And for number two on our list, we'll go over three indicators for Oregon for the first four games, of which, if they are doing these things correctly, then they are in for a really special season. So the first indicator that they're going to have a special season, and this is talking about the first four games of the season. First, team efficiency, right? So we're looking for low turnovers, low penalties, execution in the red zone, execution third and fourth down, right? So these first handful of games, you're playing lesser opponents, right? And so your hopefully your first groups are not playing as many snaps as normal. But whenever they are in the game, I want to see execution. Okay. So we want to try to get out of the first game, issues that happen to most teams. We want to take care of the ball. We don't want to see dumb penalties or a lot of false starts or like a lot of, mental mistakes, low snaps, that kind of thing. And then we want to see execution in the red zone and third and fourth down, especially knowing Dan Lanning likes to go for it on fourth a lot. We want to see how does this offense handle the situations, and then on the flip side, how does the defense handle them? How do we get off the field? How do we get after the quarterback and passing downs? Do we create turnovers? That sort of thing. If we can see that in the first four games, then we're going to be in for a great season. Number two, it's all about getting in and getting out and staying healthy, right? To develop that depth. So last year, the first part of the season, they did a really good job of getting their first guys in, getting them out, and getting all the way down in some games to like their fourth, fifth, or even sixth string guys, right? Especially with the new rules in place, utilize those guys, utilize the young guys, because considering how long the season is now, if you have a deep playoff run, then you're going to need that depth. So that's a second indicator that we're in for a good season. If we're not able to get to those third or fourth string guys, then that means we're not executing well enough at the top end, and we need to fix that. The third indicator is reaction to mistakes. So it's going to happen, especially first game issues. Every team has these problems. There's a difference between a scrimmage and going live in an actual game. You have younger players who haven't played before in these situations. How do we handle it when things happen? How is the poise of the team? Do we stay under control? Do we, not lose? Do we not have one false start turn into five false starts? Like that's going to be a key indicator. So these are areas that I think are going to really determine the course of Oregon season when we look at the first handful of games here. To wrap up for this week, we'll talk about the preseason rankings. Okay, so in the preseason, um, it's one of those things that you don't want to look too far into it because it's kind of a um, beauty contest, right? Um, and so you want to look at it with a grain of salt. Um, and because it can change quickly. If you look at the very first rankings of every team, every season, and you compare them to the teams that are in the top 25 at the end, it's usually pretty different. There's always teams that, the people swear are going to be a top five team, and it's going to be, amazing, and this team might be a contender. But they fall off in like week 4 or 5. And then you go to the other side where, nobody has paid attention to this team that preseason's ranked like 50th, and all of a sudden, they come out of nowhere and end up a top 10 team, right? So for this season, you have Ohio State. This is the coaches poll. The AP's not out yet. Ohio State's first, Oregon second, Georgia third, Texas four, Notre Dame five, Indiana six, Miami seven, Texas A&M eight, Oklahoma nine, Ole Miss 10 to round up the top 10. All right, so I'm going to give you some insight into a handful of teams that I think might be overrated and some that might be underrated. So we'll start with um, the overrated. So I'm not really sold at this point in time on Texas. Okay. So they have Cam Coleman, who I think is going to be, a top round pick. Um, and they have talent. Okay, that's not ever been the issue for Texas. I don't think talent has ever been a problem. They've always been a big brand, that historically has won a lot. They have a good coaching staff. They have all the resources you could ever want. I just don't buy Arch Manning. I just haven't. Um, I think he's okay, right? And what I've noticed in the, current version of the college playoff system, you need a little bit better than okay. He's a little bit too up and down for me. He might flash one game against a lesser opponent, and then the next game he has like three or four picks or something. And that's a little too inconsistent. So if they're going to make a decent, well, first of all, they have to get into the playoff. Um, but if they're going to make a run, then you need more consistency from him. So I still think they're a good team. I just I don't see them lasting at the end. Unless Arch Manning, quells a lot of questions that he currently has. The second team I feel is overrated is Texas Tech. Okay. So their defense last year was amazing. That front was probably one of the best fronts, probably the best front I've seen since Georgia from a couple of years ago. They were really good. Um, and most of those guys are gone. They do retain some talent, but most of them are gone. But really, they're in an uptick of spending, right? They have a lot of cash recently, and they've gone out and been really aggressive. Unfortunately for them, the quarterback that they picked for this year is not going to be available due to gambling issues, right? So they are going to be relying on Will Hammond as their starter, who's coming off an ACL injury. So I think Will is okay, but there's a reason why they went out to get another guy because Will is just okay. So I think they'll be solid again defensively. That won't be a problem, but I don't see their offense producing as much as they could have. So I think they're going to be solid, but not great. And then a couple of sleepers that I have. So the first one I have is USC. Now, I fucking hate USC as a Duck fan, but I have to give credit, right? Um, Jaden Lava is a really sneaky good quarterback. They graduate, obviously, their top receivers. But I think it's USC, they restock in that area. Um, Skill players has never been an issue for Lane Kiffin. It's always been in the trenches that has really been his problem. And so I think that, with a really good quarterback, decent skill guys, I think they're going to be competitive. It's really going to be a matter of can the defense match the offense and what happens when they play more physical teams, because that's kind of been Lane Kiffin's like Achilles heel. But I do think uh they're going to push harder in the Big Ten than they have so far. They'll be in the action. Another sleeper I think is Tennessee. I do think Sean Bishop, their running back, is going to be one of the top two or three running backs in the country. He's really solid. I do think they've been building over the time. And I like what they're doing. So I think they're going to make some noise in the SEC this year. LSU is going to be interesting. I did like, Sam Levitt when he was with Arizona State. And I think that if Dante had gone to the NFL, I would have wanted Sam at Oregon. I think he's a very solid, consistent quarterback. They also picked up Jordan Seaton, the coveted tackle from Colorado. And, so they're adding some key pieces to the talent that they already have. I think, it's going to be a matter of can they win the big games, right? They didn't do that very well the last couple of years. So if they can win a couple solid matchups, I think they can make some noise. Um, in the SEC, really probably my favorite team to follow though is going to be Ole Miss. Like I love me some Trinidad. Um, I just think even though, he's had kind of a roundabout long journey at the quarterback position, I just really like watching him play. Like he's really fun to watch. Like I think if he has a solid year this year, he'll be, playing on Sundays for a decent team next year. I also really like, their running back, Lacey. He's just a workhorse, and you get him the ball, and he can do anything with it. So I think that offense is going to be still really fun to watch. And I am just excited to see what they end up doing because they were uh, basically overproducing last year. What did they do this year now that the expectation is higher? Um, another team um, that, I really think uh, could be interesting to follow is Penn State. Okay, so last year they had a terrible into that last year. And I think Oregon kind of took their soul a little bit. Um, but I do think they still have talent. And I do think when you add in, a new coaching staff, a new direction, that's going to help them a lot. They kind of were just stale, to be honest. But I think that, it might not be this year, but I think in a year or two, they're going to be, pushing back towards the top of the Big Ten again. So those are really kind of my sleeper picks as well. Week we'll have another kind of preseason episode. We'll go over some key position groups for Oregon, some breakout players to look out for, and also some preseason Heisman talk. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next week.